Hello. So today we are going to be talking about pregnancy myths as a T1D Pregnancy Myths, and this is directly from my guide. So I'm just going to jump to that page. Okay, so like I said, this is coming directly from my guide, Limitless, the T1D Motherhood Method. I'm sharing a little bit of one of the chapters with you. I had to resize this for a presentation, so if it looks a little, you know, the format looks a little bit weird. That's why my actual guide is not a slideshow. It's like an actual PDF. But let's dive in and talk about some T1D and pregnancy myths. So, the first myth that I see a lot is that people think you have to have a C section. I'm not exactly sure where this comes from. But it seems to be a common question. I personally have delivered all three of my children vaginally, and I know this is true for many of my clients as well. Now, that's not to say there's anything wrong with having a C section. Obviously, whatever you need to do and whatever keeps you and your baby healthy and safe is what's most important, right? There are, of course, circumstances that come up where you might have to have a C section, but no matter the way that you birth your baby, the most important thing is that you and baby are healthy, and that's what matters, right? Um, but yeah, this idea that just because you're a type 1 diabetic and you're having a baby means you have to have a C-section is not true. Um, I have actually heard people say that their doctors have told them this, and I would just argue that have to be your biggest advocate, especially in pregnancy sometimes. So if your doctor is telling you this, I would ask them why. What's the reasoning? Understand where they're coming from. And if you come to the conclusion with you and your research, and maybe after talking to your doctor, that you don't need to automatically go, start with a C section, then great. Like, do that. You are going to have to learn to advocate for yourself in pregnancy as a type 1 diabetic. So that's really important to remember and feel comfortable doing. Number two is that you will have a huge baby. Now, this is just a favorite one of mine because, no, not really. I find it actually really annoying because the size of your baby depends on many factors. Yes, if you have uncontrolled blood sugars throughout your pregnancy, you know, more often than not, then yes, that can contribute to your baby being larger. But it also is related to other factors, sorry, like genetics. So if you were a big baby when you were born, if your husband or your partner was a big baby when they were born, or your sperm donor or whoever, then that could be more likely that you have a big baby as well. Okay. But the point here too is that anybody can have a big baby, right? It is not just T1D women that can have big babies. And I think also this comes from kind of the um, outdated or just the way things used to be done in pregnancy for type 1 diabetics. I think this probably was more common back in the day because they didn't have access to, the technology and the things that we have access to now that can allow us to have better control during pregnancy. But this I see as almost like a scare tactic that MFM in particular tend to use. Like, if you don't have well controlled blood sugars 24/7, you're going to have a huge baby. And it's just like, that's not true. I mean, it can be true, but that's not a guarantee, right? And also, it's like, why are we so obsessed with the size of our baby? As long as your baby is healthy, who cares how big they are? Like, honestly, that's my opinion, especially after having lost my third child to full-term stillbirth now, not related to my type 1 diabetes. Um, the most important thing to me is that my baby is alive and healthy. And truly, that's all that matters to me. So can we just like let go of this obsession with the size of babies? Um, You can see here my first two are both 8 pounds, and my son was 7 pounds. So pretty average blood sugars, and my A1Cs were in the fives, six, maybe like one was in the sixes, but pretty much in the fives throughout all of my three pregnancies. So that's that. Number three is that you have to be induced. That is not true. So typically, yes. Oh, typically, yes. You type 1 diabetics are induced between 37 to 39 weeks, assuming that blood sugar control is okay. There's no other issues like high blood pressure, preeclampsia, that sort of thing. And we are at a higher risk for placenta failure. So yes, most of the time we are induced. I do know there are women out there who choose not to. If, blood sugars and baby and everything is looking good and healthy, then yes, some people choose to wait and try to go into labor on their own naturally. My personal opinion, especially now after losing my son, is that I I don't mess around with that. I was induced at 39 weeks with my first, at 37 and 2 with my second, and just before 37 weeks with my son. But I was planning on being induced with him like right at 37 weeks with him. So I I hope to get pregnant again, and have a healthy baby, and I will likely be induced around 36 weeks because of my history. And I don't know, my opinion, even before losing my son, was I would rather err on the side of caution. And, especially once you're at that like 36, 37 week point anyway, like typically baby is going to be pretty well developed. Sometimes their lungs can need a little bit more time, but most of the time, assuming that your doctor is saying that everything's looking good and all of that, I don't know. For me personally, I would be induced when my doctor says to be induced. But that is your own opinion. You can do your own research. I know people have very strong opinions about this. I'm just speaking from my experience and the way that I feel about it, but you can do what you wish to do. I'm just telling you kind of what most T1D women do. Typically, again, I would say between 37 and 39 weeks is when most T1D women are induced. The other thing I want to say too is that sometimes there is this idea around being induced that, because you're being induced, it's gonna be a really long, hard labor, and what I just wanna say is that, yes, that can be true, but it also cannot be true. So, I was induced with my first 2, and my first, labor was, like, honestly textbook. It was pretty great as far as giving birth goes. I was dilated before I went in to be induced, so I think that definitely helped. My epidural worked perfectly. Just everything went super smoothly. With my second, same thing. I was dilated before I went in, which again, I know that really helped, and he came out really quickly. With Clark, um, I was not dilated. It did take a little bit longer, but still not quite that bad of what I have heard sometimes happening with being induced, but obviously that's a unique situation too. I think that I just don't like this idea that people kind of scare people into being like, "Oh, if you're gonna be induced, like, are you ready for it to be this long, hard labor?" It's like, labor is hard, no matter what, right? I mean, typically. Um, we don't need to be scaring people to make them more afraid than they might already be, right? So yeah, that's just kind of my opinion. I just don't like, just don't have expectations on if you think it's going to be short or long, right? Just you have to do it anyway. You got to get the baby out. So, like, let's just maybe not go right to the worst case scenario. Okay. Okay, the other thing I wanted to talk about here, another myth that I see is that you will have a child with type 1 diabetes if you are a type 1 diabetic yourself. And so I just wanted to talk a little bit more about this because this is not necessarily true either. Again, sorry, the format is a little bit weird on this part because again, this is from my guide. That's a different format. But so let's talk about some of the stats. I'm not going to directly read through all of these, but I'll just say some of the kind of main ones. So if the mother has T1D and her child is born after she is 25 years of age, the risk is 1 in 100. If the child is born before she is 25 years of age, the risk increases to 1 in 25. This is from the ADA website. If the father has T1D, the child has a greater risk of developing it, about 1.8 times greater. Family history does increase the risk, but not all T1Ds have family members with diabetes, me included. Nobody in my family has it. Compared to the general populations, the risk of developing T1D is about 1 in 300, which I would be curious to see if that has changed at all. These stats might need to be updated. And then, yeah, also important to know that many of the studies focus on onset in childhood. So it's important to note that lifetime risk may vary. And as we've been seeing, people are getting diagnosed in adulthood more often. So this is my mindset, though. The way that I choose to look at this is regardless of any stats that are out there, I would choose to have my children any day. If they get diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, obviously, I hope they don't. But if they do, they have a role model who they can look up to. They have somebody that they can relate to. They have somebody that knows exactly what it feels like. They have somebody who has lived through it and been through pretty much all of the same experiences that they will go through. Like, obviously, I hope my children don't get type 1 diabetes just because, it adds a complication to life. But if they do, I'm not going to treat it as some big, like, life ruiner. I personally don't feel like it's ruined my life. And I just think that if somebody is choosing not to have diabetes or have a child because they're afraid that their child might get type 1 diabetes, I would almost argue that to an extent, that's maybe more based on the way that they manage their own disease and they don't feel, well, I don't want this to be taken the wrong way, but they don't feel confident in their own management. Again, obviously, none of us want our children to get type 1 diabetes, right? Like, we know what it entails. But I think if you're letting it stop you that much from building your family because you're afraid that your child could possibly get type 1 diabetes, I just would maybe suggest that you really dive into that a little bit more. Obviously, not everybody wants kids, and that's fine. And if you feel like it's not something that you want to risk, that's fine. We all can make our own decisions. Please don't take any of this in the wrong way. My mindset is that if my children ever did get diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, who better than to be able to help teach them and guide them and mentor them through what this is like. So yeah, that's kind of my opinion. Like I said, yeah, I can't imagine my life without my children, and the possibility of them possibly developing T1D is far outweighed by them being alive and being a part of my life in general. So that's my beliefs on it. You can have your own, but I just want to share my perspective with you guys, and maybe it can hopefully help some of you who are having some of this fear. So, anyways, if you want more support on how to prepare for pregnancy, what to expect in pregnancy, how to lower your A1C, how to still eat carbs and have well controlled blood sugars, how to exercise and have better control, um, postpartum, breastfeeding, labor, all of that is inside this guide here. It's called Limitless, the T1D Motherhood Method, and it goes over all of that, everything that I have learned, the skills and systems that I have used in my pregnancies and use now just in my normal everyday life. But specifically to have a calm, confident pregnancy with well controlled blood sugars without feeling restricted and overwhelmed 24/7. My guide Limitless is exactly where you can learn that. And like I said, it's everything that I have taught myself, everything that I've taught the hundreds of other T1D women that I've worked with to help them have healthy pregnancies as well. And you can find the link to that either below in the description box or on my page or on my Instagram or TikTok page, which is at the beauty in living underscore. And as always, my DMs are always open. You can always send me a message on there if you have any questions about the guide or just anything in this video. You can comment below any other things that you want me to create videos on or questions that you have. I'm happy to, you know, build up this library of free resources for those of you who are looking for more support with type 1 diabetes and pregnancy and how to prepare and what to expect and all of that stuff. So please subscribe. It means so much to me. And I, again, would just love to build this channel so that I can get more of this knowledge and tips and support out there to more women who need it. And yeah, hopefully I'll see you in my next video. Okay, bye.